direction to staff be confirmed.
Someone like to move that? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Comments? Questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, recorded vote.
For a vote for the first item of council reporting out of closed session, Councillor Humphreys, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Kim was absent. Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson votes yes. Councillor Gartner? Sorry, Councillor, you're on mute.
My apology, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo was absent. Councillor Gilliland was absent, and Mayor Maracus.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Second item.
Second item is to defer the report until July the 12th.
Someone like to move that? Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Gardner. Recorded vote.
Record vote for the second item of council reporting out of closed session. Councillor Gartner, how do you vote?
Yeah, I vote yes.
Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Kim was absent. Councillor Gallo was absent. Councillor Humphreys
Yes.
and Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson votes yes, and Councillor Gilliland was absent. The motion carries.
Thank you. Confirming bylaw. Someone like to move that? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Gardner, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Mr. Clerk, time is 7:03. I will call this general committee meeting to order. We'd like to start by acknowledging that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and Treaty Number 20 territories of the Chippewas of Georgina Island. As a municipality, Aurora has shared responsibility for the stewardship of this land while recognizing the many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and of how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council, just to let you know, Councillor Humphreys is joining us virtually. She is supposed to be in the chair, but I will be taking the duties of the chair unless there are any objections. Seeing none. I get a motion to approve the agenda with the added item. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Gardner. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have no community presentations. We have one delegation, Mr. Michael White, resident, regarding item 9.1, retaining wall at 22 Rachewood Court. Mr. White, are you here with us? Oh, sorry, you're right here. Yeah, I apologize. I was looking on the screen. Welcome. You have 5 minutes. When we get to 1 minute remaining, you'll hear a chime. Okay. And the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me come before you on this matter again. You've seen the report from the town concerning a retaining wall that is not on my land. It's on the town land and the land of my neighbor behind me. The staff report states the retaining wall isn't recorded in any registered plans, in any records of title or later approvals. And the report further asserts that although there's no record, that they're somehow able to determine why the retaining wall was built. Namely, that the reason it was built is for the benefit of the previous owner of 31 Underhill for the purpose of supporting the pool that's there. With no documentation, I find that to be conjecture. I believe that the retaining wall is there because of a mistake that was made either in the design or the construction of the drainage swale. The staff report didn't address many of the key facts that I presented in February, and I'll just hit some of the highlights. The grading plan for the subdivision where my house is, 31 Underhill, was signed by the town in 1985, and it included a drainage swale that was 15 meters back behind my lot line south of us. The house was complete and occupied by the previous owner by 1986. And then subsequent to that, a new subdivision was planned behind us, and that grading plan was signed in by the town in 1989. And this is important. The elevations today at the back of my lot are essentially as set out in the 1989 grading plan. I had a surveyor come in and check them. So the grade has not been changed since that plan was developed in 89, even with the construction of the pool, which, by the way, there is on record, or I have a building permit for it, which does not make any reference to drainage or retaining walls. The new grading plan for the new subdivision envisioned moving that drainage swale 13 meters closer to my lot line. So it's only 2 meters from the lot line, but again, off my property. The pool at our house, 31 Underhill, was completed by the fall of 1993. And at some point after that, the current owners of Ragewood took occupancy. Sorry, they probably took occupancy around 91. At some point after they took occupancy, and we don't know when, work was started on moving the drainage swale forward closer to my property. And presumably it was at this point, as that new drainage swale was constructed, that the retaining wall was put in place. My wife and I bought and took possession of 31 Underhill in June of 96, and the retaining wall was in place by that point. Now, after we took possession, the town signed an acceptance document for the construction of that new subdivision, including 22 Ragewood. So it was a few weeks after in 96, and that retaining wall was already in place at the point the town signed acceptance. I would think the town would have a duty to ensure that the subdivision, including drainage, was complete as per the specifications approved by the town in the 1989 grading plan. So why was the retaining wall not noticed then, it being on town land? And doesn't the fact that the town signed off mean that they accepted the drainage arrangement as it is with a retaining wall? If there was no retaining wall, there would be no drainage. The soil gradient from the back of my property to the catch basin on town land is 56 degrees. I consulted with a soil engineer, and he informs me that the maximum gradient they would design for is 30 degrees. And anything more than that would be unstable, and all the soil would erode and fill up the catch basin. So somebody made a mistake. And the new subdivision approved by the town threatened the soil at the back of my property, which I'll say again, I had a survey come and measure, and the elevations are as per the 89 plan. Was the retaining wall put in place for the benefit of supporting my pool, or was it put in to rectify a mistake that had been made? A lawyer I spoke to explained to me that we have a duty not to create a nuisance for our neighbors. The town's my neighbor behind me. Presumably, I'm allowed to have a pool. I'm allowed to have a fence, providing I don't change the grade, which I didn't. And can my neighbor unilaterally, without consultation, change the grading behind me and destabilize my land? It doesn't seem fair to me. That's my delegation.
Thank you, Mr. White. Council, first, can I get a motion to receive and refer to item 9.1? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys, any comments or questions for the delegate? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I know earlier today you did send through a number of the documentation. I chose to forward it on to some members of staff, but does staff have all those documents that you shared with members of council today as well? Okay, thank you.
Those are the two grading plans I referenced. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. White, for coming again. I'm not sure I'm clear on this. You said that you have a building permit or a building permit was received by the then owner in 1993. And that building permit approved a pool and didn't require anything else from the owner?
Changing or drainage or retaining wall.
That's what I meant. So it didn't require the owner at that time to build retaining wall,
No,
but somehow for some reason, the drainage swale was moved to be very close to your property. And you said that the angle or the slope gradient is 56 degrees. So moving the drainage swale forward somehow necessitated that change in the gradient.
Is the proximity to the lot line and the depth of the catch basin. The combination of the two makes the gradient unstable.
Counselor,
And so in the subdivision plan, I think you sent it, yes, in the subdivision plan, when the subdivision that you occupy was built, there was, where was the catch basin at that point?
There
Mr.
was
White?
no catch basin and the drainage swale was 15 meters away. So the land
Thank you.
presumably sloped away much more gradually.
So the
Counselor?
drain, so I guess what I meant was, so the drainage plan when your subdivision was built was quite a ways away from your
Yes.
lot line.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's all for now.
thank you, Counselor. Counselor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the delegate. Just a quick question. Would you mind reminding me the personal impact to your property? I know you've stated a few things, but just the biggest concern that you have from your property perspective.
Mr. White?
Well, if the retaining wall was to fail, well, it's already starting to fail and my fence is leaning and needs to be replaced. The quotes that we've got to replace it, all the landscapers are saying, don't do it until the retaining wall is repaired because it'll just slope again. That's a concern. I don't know what would happen to my swimming pool if that retaining wall failed completely and the soil washed away. Perhaps the side wall of the pool's strong enough to hold the water. Maybe it would crack. I don't know.
Okay.
Counselor?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. And also the neighbors at the other side, like where it looks like they should be building up the retaining wall. Have they discussed with you what their plans are, if any?
There's been a few discussions with them, yeah. Based on the email that's referenced in the staff report that they sent last August, that email said that it was built for my benefit. And at that point, my neighbor changed his plans from, we'll split the cost to, it's your problem.
Oh dear. Okay. I see.
So
Yeah.
that's,
Okay, I see the situation. I mean, it would be wonderful if, you saw the staff reports and, I guess these things sometimes happen. I've seen them before. It would be wonderful if the neighbor would, to your point, split costs, look at this as a joint effort. It's not clear cut, obviously, because of how things were done way back when. Obviously, there wasn't an official permit open to do what was done and to go on to the easement of the town property. Obviously, that should never have happened, or at least in conjunction with the town. So, yeah, this makes it for a little more complicated. I'm looking forward to the discussion when we get to that later on in our meeting today. But thank you for expressing, exactly, the impact and what's happened for you and your property and the concern of your property as well. So thank you very much.
thank you.
Any other comment? Counselor Gardner, you have your hand up for a second time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Councillor Humphreys raises an interesting point about the neighbor behind. Does this retaining wall have any effect on their property? Would there be any damage to their property if it failed?
And I'll Mr. White can answer, but I think that these are better questions to deal with the report and have staff respond on
Thank
that.
you. I
But
just
I'll
wanted
ask
to-
Mr. White as well if he
Thanks.
wants to respond to that.
Yeah.
Mr. White?
Yeah. So I'm not sure, why my neighbor agreed to have, I think the builder put the retaining wall in. And at this point, my neighbor doesn't like the wall being there. He's not happy with it, but he agreed to have it put on his property. So I don't know, what's happened in between. But, from my perspective, our property was fine, minding its own business, in compliance with everything. And then along comes a new subdivision approved by the town and puts my property and my pool and my fence at risk. I just don't see why I should be responsible for that.
Counselor?
Thank you. Thank you, but you didn't answer my question. So
Oh,
the backyard of the property behind you,
yes.
would there be any effect on that property if the retaining wall failed? Is there anything in
Well-
that property that would be affected?
Well, if the retaining wall failed, it would fill in the catch basin and their property and the property of 8 or 9 neighbors would flood
Council.
without drainage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Mr. White, thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you.
It is the first item up in our items that require separate discussion, so we'll get to it very soon.
Right.
Thank you very much. Council, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. First up, consent agenda. It's the memorandum regarding Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority Board. Can I get someone to move to receive for information? Councilor Gardner, do you want to move that? Thank you. Seconder, Councilor Gilliland. Is there any comments or questions on that? Councilor Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's 2 things on that report. And I have been remiss not to mention it before, which is the Holland Marsh Treatment Recycling Facility. Very important facility that 40 million was given, 16 from the federal government, 24 from the provincial. And it's an alternate technology to stormwater retrofits. If you might remember, we had a pilot project for a stormwater retrofit on Henderson, just south of Henderson, which cost us $500,000, or cost in general the taxpayers $500,000, and it failed as a pilot project. So this will be a much more reliable way to keep a lot of the phosphorus that's flowing from the Holland Marsh into Lake Simcoe. And just to clarify, it's not all from Holland Marsh. It's just that it drains through the Holland Marsh, and it's accumulation of phosphorus from a lot of land that just happens to flow from the Holland Marsh. Thank you. The other thing is, it says that all municipalities in the Conservation Authority's area, it talks about a transition plan, and this is the new regulations from the province that say some services are mandated to be acquired by conservation authorities, and others are to be discussed with the municipalities to decide what we might want, what services we might want to buy from the Conservation Authority. The date on that is February 28th, 2022. The Conservation Authority was supposed to consult with the municipalities on programs and services, and we were to decide and we'll estimate the cost and decide what we wanted to buy from the Conservation Authority. And I don't remember anything like that coming to council. And it seems that it's either due or past due for us to have that discussion. So I don't know, does any staff know about that?
Councilor, I believe if our CEO wants to add in, but in case I get this wrong, but I believe that's what we dealt with Shepherd's Bush. How now we have essentially we've taken control of it.
No, that I have more information than Mr. Mayor. Sorry to disagree, but that's been in the works for maybe a few years now. That was a transfer of ownership.
Mhm.
This is to do with the Conservation Authority has to provide core services like flood control, but they have been providing other services as part of the package, but they're not allowed to do that now. So all the municipalities are supposed to look at all the services that the CA provides, look at the potential prices, and then decide if we want to take advantage of any of those. And I think the deadline is fast approaching, or as I said, may even have passed. I think that has to be a council discussion because it would go to our council budget process for 2023. Well, if staff isn't aware of that, could I ask them to look into that? There was a workshop recently that I attended on Zoom, and they were discussing all of these things, and I was a little surprised that that council hadn't heard anything about this. We did get in the end of December a transition plan. They did give us that transition plan, and I think that was sent to us by the clerk. but there's been nothing further. So perhaps someone could speak to the Conservation Authority and see about the services that they're offering and how we would decide if we wanted to take advantage of them.
Okay, so Councillor, we'll look into it, and then I'll reach out to York Regional staff and see what we're doing from a regional perspective as well.
Okay, and I think it is time sensitive, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Advisory Committee meeting minutes, we have 2 of them. A motion to approve and receive for information. Items 8.1 and 8.2. Someone?
I'll move it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Humphrey, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions on those items? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Items requiring discussion, 9.1 retaining wall at 22 Reachwood Court. The recommendation is that report number PDS 22-110 be received for information. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Comments, questions, Councillor Humphreys? Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the report from staff. Understand that, there's no record of this, there's no permits, there's no issue at all. But we do have a situation here that, you have to feel for the resident. And, we have some statements in here. So through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a statement here saying that the retaining wall was really only put up to support the pool. Is that just sort of what we think or we believe? Because it looks like the pool was there before the subdivision. So if that's the case, if the build developer put in a retaining wall because of the new subdivision and they knew they had to do that to protect the pool from that perspective, the new subdivision comes in. So really that should have been, if this was sort of a new development today, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno, would we have been notified by the builder that they would have placed a retaining wall there just for the sole fact of supporting the pool? Would it under a normal circumstance?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would, staff would have approved those grading plans. Based on our records, the 2 plans of subdivisions that were registered and the accompanying grading plans did not indicate any retaining wall. So yes, it's our best guess that retaining wall was built sometime in late 80s, early 90s for the purposes of the retaining that pool on 31 Underhill. Our records do not indicate the need for a retaining wall in the grading plans nor the subdivision agreement.
Right. Okay.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. So that being said, it looks like it was put in, and say we approved it. That's good. What would I'm not really worried about it going over into our easement of our land, but if it was today and the builder said, no, we need to put this in, when they leave the subdivision, the builder's gone, that retaining wall, would that normally fall in with the resident the residents of that property, which I believe would be Underhill in this perspective?
Mr. Ramuno?
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It'd be the responsibility of the property owner.
Right, where it's
Counselor?
actually landing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, because what I hear is this retaining wall has a couple of negative effects. One of them is it could potentially lose the support that the pool needs and the fencing of that neighbor, 22 Reachwood. But I also hear that it's also there for a catchment of where all the drainage goes from other houses into that area. And should the retaining wall start to disintegrate or become not in good order, that we're going to have a bigger problem and there'll be some flooding or other impacts to the properties there. So it looks like 31 Underhill has a responsibility to help fix this. Now, whether it's on our records or not, it's not. We know it now that it is. It's almost like we have to work backwards so we can absolutely understand that it's there now. But the ownership goes back to the owners. So I'm just wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, if I know we've got a report here, but is there an opportunity to notify 31 Underhill that they have an obligation? I'm sorry, is it Underhill or where's the actual retaining wall on? I'm sorry.
So Counselor, I believe you want to say 22 Rachwood has an obligation.
Yes, Rachwood. I'm so sorry. I got the addresses
The
back.
owner of on Underhill was the one that was presenting today, Mr. White.
I'm sorry, Mr. White. I meant Rachwood, not Underhill. I'm looking at the diagram now. So the person on at Rachwood has an obligation, as it's on their property, to look after that. They may not like it, but they have to. And is there an opportunity now for staff? I know it's got nothing. It's not part of our jurisdiction. And please, stop me if I'm incorrect, Mr. Ramuno, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno. But is there a way to notify the owners of Rachwood to say, look, this is, this retaining walls in your area. There are issues with it. There is a neighborly requirement to have that that looked after. I know I've been involved in these before, and we usually say no, we can't, but I just feel that there's an obligation of Rachwood to make sure that they look after this properly and look after their neighbors. That's my perspective. You, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor,
Councillor.
is there any way that we could notify Rachwood that that's something that
Mr.
we should
Ramuno?
be looking at? Don't answer if it's not right, Mr. Runo. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, Mr. Ramuno. I'll leave it as a comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I may
Councillor.
come back. I want to hear some more comments around the table for a minute.
Thank you. Councillor Gettleman?
Thank you very much. First, I want to apologize being on Zoom. Fortunately, I was a victim of delayed flight, so I'm doing the best that I can. So anyway, I'm moving along. I think Councillor Humphreys really did touch on most of the questions that I had asked, but I guess the one question I really wanted to reiterate was in respect to the swale at the back of the property. There was some notice through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno about the distance of the swale to the property, which appeared to be a lot less than what it was supposed to be. Is that correct?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify with respect to the catch basin, there are a couple catch basins. There is a catch basin on the town-owned the park, and that was installed. That drainage swale serves Rachwood Court. That swale and those catch basins do not serve Underhill. They serve Rachwood, deal with the overland flow from the park and the easement. The retaining wall is actually built on that storm sewer easement. So the speaker was correct that based on the grading plans that were approved, the catch basin was moved slightly to the west. Then again, that's a decision that was made in the field by the town engineers and the contractor. It has no impact on the either 31 Underhill or the Rachwood properties. It's entirely within the town-owned parkland.
Councillor?
Okay, so what happens, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno, if that retaining wall does give and it does start to block the swale? If the homeowners were to do nothing, then what happens? They're looking at it like, well, this swale is supposed to be so many feet away from my property. So it's a kind of like, he said, she said about, when this retaining wall was done, but then if the retaining wall wasn't done, would have there been a problem with this swale? So it's just a matter of, if the distance of that swale was a lot further away, would that retaining wall have been there to begin with? So I'm just trying to kind of add some clarity. Like, I guess there's two questions there.
Mr. Ramuno?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So the retaining wall, staff have viewed the retaining wall on the town property. Again, we don't know why it's there, but it's stable. It's not leaning over. And if by chance it were to collapse, town staff would remove it to ensure that there's no blockage within that catch basin.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. So, and I guess the follow-up to that would be, as far as like that distance, if that did, obviously it did something to the swale, the town would have to at least alleviate and move that. So I'm just trying to find the benefit here, because eventually something's going to have to be done to repair at some point. And so again, it's like, would it have been different? Will we be in a different situation if that swale was actually, in fact, I don't know, I can't remember how many meters away it originally was. Would we be in a different situation as far as the way it's eroding versus the way it was installed now?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, staff doesn't believe so. The location of the actual catch basin is not the issue here.
Okay.
Counselor?
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to look at this from a fact basis. We know that the subdivision, the first subdivision, Underhill, had a different plan for the drainage. There was a substantial area behind those homes, and that's where the swale was at that point for the drainage. We also know, and I hope Mr. White can send us the approval for the pool. That was in 1993. He got an approval, or the former owner got an approval to do the pool, and to do the pool without any kind of retaining wall. So I'm thinking that when requests for pools are made, that the building department, engineering, looks at the lay of the land and would have said at that time, well, you can do a pool, but you've got to do a retaining wall. And that isn't in the permission from the building department. So in 1993, there was a pool approved. There were no extra requirements. When the subdivision Rachwood to the south was done, that whole area behind Underhill was changed. So the plan, actually, I would think the plan of subdivision was changed in that it would have included where the drainage was to go. So the new subdivision required the drainage to go in a different place. I don't know, maybe it was the lot size, whatever reason, we don't know that, but it required a different location for the stormwater management. And it's at that point that the pool became compromised, because it was perfectly fine before. And our staff signed off in 1996 that everything was okay. There's no mention of the pool. There's something amiss here. I don't know. I would ask that Mr. Minow could try and look into this further. But if the pool was fine according to the plans for Underhill, and then because of the next subdivision, it wasn't fine, it seems to me there has been an error on the part of our staff, especially in light of the fact that they gave permission for the pool without any further conditions. So if Mr. White could send that permission for the pool to Mr. Minow, perhaps Mr. Minow could look into it a little bit further. It's just, there's something that's just, the pieces are not fitting together here. If there had been any issue on the slope of that land, there certainly would have been a caution about a retaining wall, or maybe they wouldn't even have approved it. So for the council meeting or the next GC, I would ask that Mr. Minow look into this a little further in light of the pool permission that was granted. It doesn't seem to be on our records, but Mr. White does have a copy.
Mr. Romano, by next week, could you try to look in for some more information? Mr. Romano's nodding yes, Councillor. He'll try to get as
That would
much.
be great. I'd like to know what the missing puzzle piece is. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Mr. Minow.
You're welcome. Councillor Humphries, do you have your arm up for a second time?
I do.
Okay,
Mr.
well,
Mayor.
I'm just gonna wait because I got Counselor
Sure.
Thompson first, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to make sure whether I need to clear that off the board or not. But
Thank you.
Counselor Thompson? first
Thank
time?
you. And through you to Mr. Serio. Mr. Serio, with regards to risk and liability, perhaps you can sort of expand on it and whether or not if council were to support the staff recommendation, which is just to receive it and let the matter be settled by the property owners, whether that increases or decreases or makes any difference whatsoever with regards to risk and liability for the town.
Sarah?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. If council just receives the report for information, there would be no liability on the town. If council does more, there could potentially be liability on the town in terms of interfering. While we do have an easement on the property, the owner is ultimately responsible for their own property. We shouldn't be convening in private matters. And we may get ourselves into a little bit more trouble if we do when we really shouldn't be.
Counselor?
Thank you. But I thought a portion of the wall was on town lands.
Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. So the portion that is on town lands is a somewhat different story. The town would be responsible and liable if the wall should fail. However, it's my understanding from town staff that one, the wall is not that high, and two, it's in a decent condition. So the town's risk of it failing anytime soon is probably minimal.
Counselor?
Thank you.
You, Counselor Humphreys, second time.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. And, I absolutely understand, the liabilities and so on, but I do feel this is one of those not clear-cut ones. I may be right or wrong. I don't understand the huge liability on this. I feel that there's a situation here that's kind of happened, after there's no documentation and we have a resident that wants to fix his fence, but he knows it's going to just tumble because the other resident isn't doing what they need to do. I don't see any harm in asking a resident, and it doesn't have to be staff. I may look into this myself, but just to ask Rachel Wood to look after the matter. And, there was a commitment earlier, split the costs, and now he's like, none of my business, which isn't really true, and it maybe doesn't understand the impact of not correcting the error that could get worse and cause lots of problems for all his neighbors or their neighbors. So I guess I thank you. Councillor Gartner mentioned another one that's good to help us as well. But I don't mind helping as far as we can without, going into too many areas that might get us too engaged. But I do believe because of the easement piece we're in it whether we want to be or not, and I think we should do our best to see if we can at least educate the owner of Ragewood that they are accountable to that wall. It's not the town, but it's theirs. It's just an education, and that they should do something to upkeep it, maintain it, so that we're all good neighbors and do what we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garner, do you have your hand up for a second time?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bruno. I believe I saw in the report that there's no record of the pool being approved.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We believe the pool was constructed based on air photos around 1998. The only record we have is in 1993 when the owner of the property came in for a pool enclosure of the fence. But there's no permits are required for pools themselves. But the fence permit was issued in 1993, but the pool was already constructed at that time.
Counselor?
I'm sorry, the pool was already constructed in 1993?
That's correct.
So the document that Mr. White has permitting the pool or permitting the fence enclosure, would that also have noted that there would have needed to be a retaining wall there?
Mr. Romano?
Mr. Mayor, no, we have no records or documents requiring that retaining wall.
Counselor?
Yes, thank you. I'm just thinking that staff wouldn't say, well, you can build a fence, but it'll fall into oblivion if you don't build a retaining wall. But I can't see that staff would approve that. That's one of the things I find rather strange. Also, nobody really knows who did the retaining wall. When the subdivision was approved in 96, I think there would have been some mention of the retaining wall. It would be on the plans. I do think that the moving of the drainage swale to what is existing now, I do think that's what caused the problem. And I would like to know when that was decided, that would be moved very close to the Mr. White's now property. Anyway, it just doesn't make sense. So if you can try and make some sense of it, and Mr. White can send you his permit, maybe that will give you some clues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? I think all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.2, Phragmites remediation. Recommendation is that report number OPS 22-014 be received. 2, that staff be directed to initiate a Phragmites control program utilizing chemical herbicide for treatment and controlled burn where applicable. And 3, that the Phragmites control programs and incremental annual service costs be included in the town's future 4-year operating budget commencing in 2023 for council consideration. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Gilliland. Any comments or questions? Councillor Gardner.
Through staff, does this mean that we are going to be applying for a chemical to destroy the Phragmites that is not allowed at the moment by the municipality's use?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. That's what
Councillor?
we're asking.
Oh, yeah. Councillor?
That's so you're asking, this report is asking permission to approve that use, but would we also have to get approval from the government? From the province?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe so. The municipality has passed a bylaw prohibiting the use of chemicals. It could permit that or create an exception, particularly for Phragmites, and we're only looking for Phragmites. I do not believe that will need provincial.
Councillor?
I know that the Arboretum, you said at one of the council meetings that everything has been tried to remove Phragmites. So not only is this the last resort, but I'm wondering, I mean, it's really out of hand. I guess I'm wondering why we didn't try and do this before.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, council, I believe back in 2008, were quite adamant about removing any use of chemicals by the municipality. So we have not been using any chemicals. We are responding to a notice of motion by a member of council.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you. I think that was a directive from, we were working on it for the town, but I think the province beat us to it and made that directive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing the report. I think it was really important for the residents to, have a good read of how invasive this plant can be, and I really appreciate that staff really identified the areas in our town that are at risk. It's so important to protect our natural capital assets and ensure that we're not causing any more harm. That's not going to benefit, obviously, the town of Aurora with residents with water, drinking, fire hazards, stormwater management. I can go on and on, but needless to say, I'm really happy with this report. I'm also happy that Green Shovels had reached out to you. I know they reached out to me as well, and that there's some collaborative initiatives there in hopes that they can help, and there's some granting initiatives. So I'm really happy about that as well. I also wanted to, which is part of the, by the way, the Invasive Species Center. They're the ones that had reached out to kind of let me know. I also had reached out to the Arboretum as well to make sure that they had a look-see on the report that's coming out. And I'd asked if they were in favor of the report that came out. And if I may, in quotes, it says, as you know, we, the Arboretum, and us personally support the town taking actions on the control of Phragmites is destroying our wetlands. And in our opinion, until such time as a biological control agent can be found, the only effective treatment is spraying with appropriate herbicides. From our experience in the Arboretum, this needs to be done for several reasons. Apologies, I'm on 400, not driving. For several years, it's been needed for several years, gradually reducing the size of the infestation. The town needs to support this with the budget allocation and a 4-year plan in keeping within the 4-year budget cycle that's now being undertaken. So I just wanted to kind of pass that along as well. Obviously, we're identifying a need for this kind of remediation, and hopefully council will agree. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, I just want to get some clarification around the numbers that are being suggested as a potential cost come the operational budget. So on page 6, it speaks to York Region and says that between 2020 and 2021, they cut and treated approximately 47,000 square meters, and the costs related to the treatment were $60,000. But the budget request that you're indicating would be roughly around $75,000 a year. So are you proposing that we're going to be treating an area much bigger than what York Region was, or different products, or why is the difference in the funding?
Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we set a limit, which was why we came up with $75,000. How we came up with $75,000 was based on the cost that we have identified from use by the Arboretum as well as York Region. We're hoping that we're going to be able to create or treat an area larger than York Region if we possibly can. However, quite frankly, we could spend more than $75,000 if we wanted to treat all the areas all at once. But we believe that most prudent method is over a 4-year period. And yes, we will be treating an area much larger with the region treated for $60,000. Ultimately, we'll be asking council over 4 years for $300,000.
Councillor.
Thank you. And again, through you to Mr. Downey, you also allude to the fact that you'd like to make a staff request for somebody to oversee the initiative. And so perhaps you can touch on that. And is there any opportunity to look at this as an N6 initiative? Because I assume that everybody is dealing with the same issue. And is there a way for us to collectively work together as one unit and perhaps provide savings for all the municipalities?
Mr. Downey.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we are in constant discussion with our N6 partners. Actually, I'm chair of the N6 and so we're always talking about opportunities where we can help each other out with services. I will be putting it on as a topic of discussion if council approves this funding and stating that I have got some authorization to move forward, and perhaps others would like to jump on board. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
The staffing.
The staffing, that's right. Excuse me, I apologize. So we've identified that we would target some seasonal staff in order to assist. It's not a full-time thing. We just need to give some direction to this contractor, identifying those areas, making sure that it's done properly, that type of thing. So it would be a redeployment of some seasonal hours that we would normally hire them for park maintenance. And we would make sure that we had some expertise when in the hiring process for that seasonal person.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's great that you're going to put it on the agenda for the N6. I mean, there's always economies of scale. And if we're all doing the same thing and there's an opportunity to collectively work together and leverage our buying power and perhaps get a better price for all of the municipalities, great. And or with regards to staffing, if everybody's, allocating staff to oversee this. Again, there may be some savings, so I appreciate your willingness to speak with it with our N6 partners and take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering the effect of this on the water flowing into the Holland River, the branch of the Holland River that runs near the Arboretum, or in the Arboretum almost.
Mr. Downey?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, that's one of the complications with Phragmites that normally takes place in wetlands. So it's one of the reasons that we want to make sure we hired a licensed contractor with regard to that treatment to ensure that we have minimal impact on that area. It may be a seasonal choice. So there are some areas where they are wet at some points of the year and not at others. So we may be able to go in and treat and burn out the biomass when we haven't got or we have less impact on the water system. So it will depend on specific areas that we treat and how we treat them and when we treat them.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that answer, Mr. Downey. And maybe doing it in 4 different segments, that might also put less chemical into the water that would get diluted and hopefully cause less harm. So I like the plan. Thank you.
Do you any other comments or questions? Seeing none, call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.3, post-pandemic wrap-up. Recommendations that report number CAO 22-002 be received for information. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Any comments or questions on this item? Councillor Gardner, is your hand up? Or was it still up?
I didn't put it down. I'm
Okay.
sorry. And it was also up. It was also up to second the vote, but that was
Okay.
done.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions on this one? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Gardner?
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, we should, well, it's a good update. I appreciate it. I'm sure the residents will appreciate it. And it looks like we did a pretty good job. So congratulations to staff.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys? You're
Yes,
on mute,
thank you.
Councillor. Oh,
Yep. Thank you. Thank you through Mr. Mayor. And I wanted to state the same thing. So I know it's a wrap up, although I'm trying to get over it myself right now. COVID seems to be lingering a little, but the emergency, thank goodness, is not. And I just wanted to call out that yourself, Mr. Mayor, and staff and council members, you know, it was, to me, the event was hopefully one of that we'll never see again. But what was done to quickly continue to provide services to our residents and additional services during those times of, you know, real difficulty like we haven't seen before, was really tremendous. And looking back, you almost just can't believe all the work that was done. So I want to thank you and CEO and the staff, because I do believe some of the great measures put in place during those times are still in effect today for some of those enhanced offerings that we have for residents. And, you know, the preparedness for the future, which I really, again, hope we never need to utilize it. But if we do, we can see that we can keep on going. And that's a real testament to the team and the motivation of doing what's best. And I think if I try to reflect on some of the positives, it's difficult during the toughest times. It was amazing to see just human nature, how everyone wanted to help. Staff would have continued to do as they do today, but would have done, you know, just whatever they could to help the residents. So I just wanted to thank you very much. It's a great review and to wrap up, and it's a tremendous work done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, I'm assuming the hand's still just up.
No, it's up
Oh,
again.
second time? Okay, go ahead.
And I, you know, it's amazing how we morphed into, you know, the online meetings. And although a lot of residents complained that, or were disappointed that they couldn't come to the council's chamber in person, I think what it says in the report is true. Hybrid council meetings will continue post-pandemic as they offer a higher level of accessibility and convenience for Aurora residents wishing to partake in the democratic process, which I think is a truth, because it is hard for some people to come out to meetings, especially those with accessibility issues or if the weather's not good. So I'm very, very glad to see that in the report. I'm very glad that we're doing that. And I'd love to hear from staff through the coming months if we actually have any residents say how happy they are that we're continuing these virtual meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, before I call the vote, I'll just echo those statements. I think staff did a tremendous job. And as was noted, when you look at the list of the things that that this municipality did throughout I'd say the 2 years that we've been going through this, it's quite a tremendous list of accomplishments that we were able to continue, providing the services to our residents, even through some closures, restrictions, and then I'll add, as far as it states it in the report too, that we were at the forefront when anything was looking at being reopened, any restrictions being lifted. Aurora was first in line when it came to providing events again for our residents, opening up our facilities. Our staff found a way to make sure that we were able to provide all those amenities and services to our residents immediately and as soon as possible. So it was a great job and work from everyone, from council, staff, and to the emergency management team. So I want to thank our CAO and all of our ELT for all the work that they did. So thank you very much. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next, we have 9.4. Post-COVID-19 pandemic recovery and future work model. 1, that report number CS 22-031 be received, and 2, that the guiding principles for the development of future alternative work policies be adopted. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Gardner. Any comments or questions on this one? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Couple of them. So my first one really, it speaks to the fact that really the last couple of years, it was certainly a challenging workplace, working from home, adjusting it and so forth. And as we saw in the last report, a lot of good things were accomplished and a lot of good things were done. The report speaks about the fact that we were still able to, be effective and be efficient. But I was just wondering, perhaps through you to Mr. Nadarozny, our CAO, if perhaps, can we as council get a little bit more details or a little perhaps more performance metrics to be able to, validate some of these assertions about being more effective or being as effective as prior to the pandemic, just for, I guess, my own self, just some sort of comfort level.
CAO?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think we could take a stab at trying to quantify some of those results. Some of it will be difficult to quantify. Some of the process changes that we have been able to achieve as a result of implementing new technology to respond to the pandemic. So some of the processes are different, but in terms of the overall work that's been put through the organization, particularly on the administrative side, I'm sure we can figure out how to show some stats that the level of productivity was equal or better than pre-COVID times.
Councillor?
Thank you. And, I don't want us to get too far into the weeds, but I think, I think it's a fair statement to say that, working from home is not for everyone. I think some people gravitate to it well, and some it's a little bit more challenging because at the end of the day, you've got to be a little bit more regimented and organized in terms of managing your time. And I'm sure every organization is challenged with that. And so perhaps, as part of that, conversation in terms of how the town plans to manage going forward is also perhaps some of the processes or checks and balances that from a leadership perspective, we're implementing to ensure that that it is working well for those that are choosing to do that, and that for those that may be struggling, there are ways to be able to identify it and either support them or figure out why. My second question, really, I guess whether, I don't know if Dimitri is online or maybe
Yes.
it's best put towards Mr. Serio, one of the two. The hybrid model still is an emerging model in a sense, and I've seen a number of articles and things written about some of the new challenges that are coming to place as a result of this hybrid model, things that, we wouldn't necessarily have anticipated, and people are managing things like WSIB claims for people who are working from home and something may happen in the household, to wanting to be having a proper office and looking to the employer to provide desks, chairs, those kind of equipment, to even questions around overtime. And so there's this whole kind of new realm of, I guess, issues or concerns that are sort of kind of emanating out of this hybrid model that a lot of different organizations are now, dealing with or learning. So my question really is more of a general one, either to Dimitri or to Mr. Serio, about, how are we, I guess, trying to stay on top of this and making sure that, these kind of pitfalls that are coming up, we're able to, I guess, either address or respond to them.
Dimitri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's for the mayor to Councillor Thompson. Thank you for your question. It's a good one because it's one we've been dealing with for the last couple of years in terms of ensuring that our employees that are working remotely are appropriately equipped in terms of technology, but also they have the appropriate guidelines to set up their work offices appropriately and avoid any type of ergonomic type of issues, repetitive strains, that type of thing. The good news is that generally the staff that are able to work remotely are considered a low risk for workplace injuries or illnesses. One of the most prevalent issues is mental health issues and psychological health and safety, which is really critical whether you work in the office or remotely. And that is a focus that we have placed our attention in terms of providing resources to employees, increasing sort of coverage for psychological treatment, but also helping with wellness initiatives across the organization. It is somewhat a new area, at least for the public sector. A lot of organizations have had remote workplaces or work from anywhere sort of policies for years. But so far, our experience for the last 2 years has been positive in that we have not experienced any significant issues from our remote workers.
Councillor?
That's great. I assume there's also some internal controls or feedback from staff as well, providing some guidance to the organization as a whole. And I certainly think the hybrid model is here to stay. I think that vast number of organizations that and people have gotten adjusted to it. There may still be further tweaks. I mean, there's always different thoughts about the work week and what changes may or may not come out of this. But at the end of the day, I'm supportive of the principles. I just want to make sure that, again, there's some processes in place to ensure that some of these new emerging issues or non-issues, at least that we're aware of, and we're always trying to address them as they come about.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Following on Councillor Thompson's question, the report that was done, Workplace for the Future, did it address a lot of the issues that Councillor Thompson was speaking of that we need to have concerns about?
Dimitri?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardner, thank you for the question. Yes, at this point, we're trying to capture the basic principles of alternative work policies and creating that flexibility. But there is a change management approach and in the aspects that Councillor Thompson spoke of, which is sort of helping our leadership teams manage employees in a different way, measuring outcomes, is well on its way. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that over the past year, a small group of staff have been working on a performance measurement program that we have had several discussions with our leadership teams, and we've landed on a particular model, which is called Objectives and Key Results. And we're well into implementation of that model, which essentially will look at our strategy and our objectives and create sort of a focus and cascading priorities down to the individual staff member with appropriate measurements and software to monitor performance across the organization.
Counselor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Counselor Humphries?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everything's been answered. I just put my hand down. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.5, Deputy Mayor options. Recommendations that report number CS 22-040 be received. 2, that staff bring forward an amendment to the procedural bylaw to institute a rotation of the deputy mayor position as described in this report. And 3, that the amendment to the procedural bylaw take effect on November 15, 2022. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Humphries, any comments or questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How do other communities that have ward systems handle this?
Mr. Clerk, I believe the report states it.
Sorry,
Excuse me. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the overwhelming majority of municipalities who have the deputy mayor in a similar position to Aurora will be next term rotate the position.
Councillor?
Thank you. This is a rather strange question. What happens if a councillor doesn't want to be a deputy mayor, or they'll just have to be?
Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it'd be a council decision at that point in terms of maybe appointing a different one for that month or changing the schedule.
Thank
Councillor?
you. Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you. After reading the report, it's obvious that quite a few of the neighboring municipalities have adopted this method. I wish I maybe had known it a little bit before our names were put in for the election, not necessarily for myself, but just for the general public to know if it was an option that we were wanting to have an elected position, then there was opportunity for people to, I guess, partake in that. But needless to say, this model does make sense. My only suggestion would be, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Clerk. The schedule has 5 slots that have been allotted to just have the mayor chair the entire time. And I understand why, just for, various reasons for the even rotation. But my suggestion would be is to, instead of having the last 4 meetings, just to kind of as the leftover, to just we normally don't have meetings in August, and I feel that if that were to happen on occasion, you're going to end up pushing that rotation forward another month just for the next upcoming rotation. So I think it would make the most sense just to go August all the way across, and then the mayor chairs the I guess September, October, and I guess July kind of thing, and then leave your December as is. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Mr. Clerk, I'm assuming it would be similar to what we do now when we're chairing a committee. If a regularly scheduled one is missed because we don't have a meeting, that it would just, the rotation would continue from the next meeting. Would that be correct? So it would basically fill in exactly. So we don't have to formally fill in. What I think what is being proposed through what you've put as a schedule is if everything went according and every meeting was held, even the August ones, then this is the way it would be. If we missed an August one, everything would just shift one over, essentially.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think, the schedule is set as it is. I mean, if we did happen to miss a meeting for whatever reason, whether it's lack of items or something else, I think that would just be sort of how that shakes out in the end. You know, we just tried to create a schedule that's as fair as possible. It is possible to amend it to include the August dates as the mayor chairs if we have to meet. But in terms of, you know, whether a meeting was missed, it would just be how it shook out in the end.
Okay. Counselor?
Thank you. I mean, I don't recall ever having like an entire month where there wasn't a general council or council schedule other than August. So I was really just simply making a suggestion to simplify it. So we're not having to like look back at a schedule and go, oh, this one shifted. Oh, that one shifted every year if it happens to be in August. I'm just really trying to simplify it. But I don't know what the rest of my colleagues think, but that was I just thought for logistics and the schedule, it would just make a lot more clear. But I'll leave it to my colleagues to decide if they have any comments on that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.6. 2022 interim forecast update as of April 30th, 2022. The recommendations that report number FIN 22-023 be received for information. Would anyone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Humphreys. Any comments or questions on this one? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.7. Tree removal permit application 72 Harrison Avenue. The recommendation is that report number OPS 22-015 be received. 2, that the tree removal application for 72 Harrison Avenue be approved. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Humphrey, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments, questions on this one? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.8. Notice of objection to notice of intention to designate 34 Bursey Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The recommendation is that report number PDS 22-085 be received. 2, that the designation bylaw be brought before council for enactment. And would anyone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gartner, second it. I need a seconder. Councillor Thompson, thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 9.9, application for site plan approval, York Region District School Board 377 Hartwell Way. Recommendation is that report number PDS 22-107 be received. 2, that the site plan application file SP 2021-12 to permit the development of a 2-story JK 8 elementary school, 638 students with a gross floor area of 5,985.50 meters squared, an accessory childcare facility, 48 children, bus drop-off lane, parking areas, additional student drop-off lanes, asphalt play yard, outdoor fence play areas, and green space throughout be approved. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Humphreys, any comments, questions on this one? Councillor Gilliland.
Question, to Mr. Mayor's staff. I just really want to avoid the kiss and ride situation that we have at some other elementary schools, especially at the preschool level, where people want to have the opportunity to have a safe place to park and exit, but also the kiss and ride where they want to drop their kids off and go. Is that taken in consideration in this plan adequately? I did read the parking section that does say it allocates a lot more parking than is required. But is there an area in mind allowing for quick exit for preschool age children, say with their caregivers, strollers, whatever?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that access onto into the site has been taken into account. There's 3 access points off of Hartwell and one off of Graham. So the drop-off, parent drop-off we think is adequate on site. Again, we always know that with schools, it's always a challenge, especially this is an elementary school, but with the secondary schools, it's always a challenge with the overflow parking. But we think with the multiple access points here, it'll be able to accommodate the parent drop-off area on site.
Counselor?
Perfect. That's exactly just what I wanted to make sure. So we didn't have this problem moving forward as we do with some of the other older schools that we didn't really maybe foresee or foretell the growth of neighborhoods. So I just want to ensure that the intended growth moving forward with our town would accommodate that kind of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gardner and then Councillor Thompson.
I think I see from the plan that this area that where the school is going to be built is exactly the area that was set aside for the development of the school. Has there been any change that I can't see?
Mr. Ramono?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's correct, Councillor Gardner. This was the layout here of the two elementary schools and the parks were as shown in the original 2C secondary plan.
Councillor?
And yes, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Assuming this gets approved, and I'm sure it will, I just want to make sure that that we work with, I guess, the school board just to provide some sort of notification to the residents in the area. I know many of them were looking forward to when this would happen. It says in the report that it's supposed to be up and running for September of 2024, but I just would encourage somehow we work with the school board to just get the word out to the residents in the area that yes, it was approved, yes, it's coming, because I know that because it is just coming to us for a site plan, the public notification process was a little bit different. I think there was just a sign put on the property, but I don't think we sent a note to the residents informing them of this. If I can just get clarification through you, Mr. Ramuno.
Mr. Ramono?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We placed a sign on the property, but we can certainly reach out to the school board to talk about sort of public engagement.
Sure.
Councillor.
Or Ms. Smith, I'm sure she, can follow up with the school board and put together something just to advise the residents that it's coming, because I'm sure they're all looking forward to it and it's a good news story. Somewhat connected to this, any word about the Catholic school that's in the area as well? Mr. Ramuno shaking his head.
Yeah,
so
he's
let's
already
do that.
saying no. Mr. Ramono, no? Yeah, no.
Mr. Mayor, no, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We have two notice motions we'll be dealing with next week. No regional report. New business. Councillor Gilliland, new business?
Yes, actually, I did have some new business. I had it written down, but I'll just go by memory. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Downey. I understand that we're going to be partaking in the the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, a new update. And I wanted to know within that update whether or not there will be some sort of study to determine whether a park in our community would require any bathroom facilities.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, the master plan doesn't determine service levels with regards to washroom facilities and parks. We have indicated in the past that we put washroom facilities in community parks, neighborhood parks are normally there for neighborhood use, and we do not put washrooms in neighborhood parks.
Councillor?
Okay, I was really hoping for a different answer there. I was under the impression that perhaps that was something that would kind of, I guess, set some sort of expectation. I do know that a lot of the parks in our town have had a real increased usage just based on the fact that there is a lot more work-life balance. Working from home remotely is becoming more of a thing. People from out of town come to some of our parks as well. So there has been a huge increase in demand, especially with parks that have programming out of it, whether it's a soccer field or baseball diamond. And I would just hope as we are increasing these services on these parks that we're also taking consideration our service levels, such as bathrooms. So is that something that you could ask them to evaluate?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly through Ms. McDougall and I, we can talk to our consultant and find out whether or not this is something that other municipalities identify as service levels, but historically we have not, but it's something that we could certainly broach the topic with the consultant.
Counselor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll talk to you offline about that a little bit further, but I think it's definitely something that we should be considering moving forward.
Thank you. Any other new business?
Sorry, can I go again? Okay. So the other thing I wanted to ask is through Mr. Mayor to, I guess it'd be Mr. Downey again. Do we have any update with in respect to the Lions Park? I know that there were some emails back and forth about some of the invasive plants and as well as some of the, I guess, weed whacking some of the bush or lawn mowing of some of the shrubs that are there. And I just wanted to know if you had any kind of information to share. I know I'm kind of throwing you on the spot right now, so you might not have the answer, but I just thought since we're here in new business, maybe you can inform us.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but I don't have the information for you. I'm happy to have staff communicate that to you through email.
Counselor?
Perfect. That would be great.
Any other new business?
I'm good.
Thank you. Counselor Humphreys, new business? No. Counselor Gardner, new business?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a follow-up to what I asked last week about the Metro Grocery Store Plaza. People are saying all kinds of things about what's going to be going on in that plaza. And perhaps you could give us some clarification for next meeting. The LCBO is coming in and it's taking the it's using the premise of the dollar store and Joyce's Dry Cleaners. I'm not sure about the pet store and the other, I believe there's a dental office. But people are starting to get worried because they look at this as a neighborhood shopping center, and they're not pleased about an LCBO. So the question is, does Aurora have any jurisdiction over where an LCBO would go?
Mr. Ramono, I'll let you answer, but I'm pretty sure you're going to say that it's allowed under the current zoning. So therefore, whatever the owner wants to rent out to, that as long as it's allowed under the zoning, they can do it, and they don't need permission from the municipality. But I'll let you elaborate if that's you need any
You're
more.
correct.
I'm correct.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor.
So I think sadness, the resident has used the word sadness. I think that is true, that I think a lot of the area, a lot of people walk over and they consider these to be family-centered stores. So I'm making that comment on behalf of the residents. And also, has there been a parking study? I'm really surprised when I go over there that it's hard to find a parking spot. And imagine that the LCBO will generate more cars than exist now.
Mr. Romano?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no, the parking rate is the same for all these commercial plazas. So regardless of the type of store, whether it's an LCBO or another retail store, the parking rate was accommodated when that site plan was originally approved.
Counselor?
Do you know when that site plan was originally approved, if the kind of stores that were going to be going, like neighborhood stores, will be going into that plaza? Do you have any idea how that was approached when this plaza was set up?
Mr. Romano?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no, I don't have that information, but the zoning, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, would permit a
Permissive.
variety of commercial retail uses.
Counselor?
So an LCBO would have the same parking standards as a dollar store or a dry cleaners?
Mr. Romano? I
Yes,
it's
that's
just-
correct.
It goes by the square footage, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Counselor?
Yeah, I think if that's the way it is, then that's the way it is. But I would think that an LCBO would generate a lot more traffic, especially on the weekends. I won't be surprised if I speak to you at some point to say that the parking situation is extremely difficult and maybe even gets a bit dangerous. There's a lot of pedestrians in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, new business? Thank you. PSA, Councillor Thompson? Councillor Gardner, public service announcement?
Gee, we've had such a busy time the last 2 weeks. I don't think I have any. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Humphries, PSA? No. Councillor Gilliland, PSA?
Sorry, I was looking for some, but I think most of the stuff was done this week, other than some upcoming stuff in August. But I think we can, well, just in case we can't, I think the next movies in the park are in August, but I guess we'll talk about it again at council and the Rib Fest, but I'm sure we'll talk about that at council, but thank you.
Thank you. I just have, Councillor Thompson already asked you, so I thought I forgot to ask you about PSAs. I just have one, obviously tomorrow. It is Concerts in the Park. It's our first one, 25th anniversary, starts at 7 p.m., runs to 9 p.m. And obviously for the full listing of the concerts running all the way to the end of August, you can go to aurora.ca/summer concerts. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone at the park tomorrow evening. Councillor Garner, did you have something to add?
Not quite public service, but I think we could congratulate staff for doing a wonderful candidating, even carrying off a cake cutting in the drizzling rain. But everybody was very good natured about it, but staff worked really hard. And with the parade as well, wasn't able to attend, but I know that was a lot of work for Shelley Ware and her team. And despite a problem, I think it went off very well. So congratulations. And I'm glad the residents had a good time.
Absolutely. I think everyone had a great time. We just had a little bit of a hiccup of some wild teens running in the drop zone of the fireworks. So we couldn't put them off at the exact time that we wanted. But other than that, everything was a great job by everybody. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Enjoy, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Feel better.